Imagine spending every waking hour fighting to survive. Imagine working 2 jobs, sleeping only a few hours each night, and carrying the weight of an entire world on your shoulders because there is nobody else to help. Then imagine waking up before dawn, walking into your kitchen, and finding one of the most powerful men in the city sitting quietly at your table as though he belonged there. No warning, no explanation, no phone call, no knock on the door, just silence. And then 6 words that would change everything. For a few seconds, she couldn't move. The coffee mug nearly slipped from her hand and shattered across the floor. Her heart pounded so hard that she could hear it echoing in her ears. Because sitting at her kitchen table was a billionaire CEO. A man whose face appeared on magazine covers. A man who owned skyscrapers. A man who employed thousands of people. A man she had only met once. And when he looked directly at her, his expression carried something she couldn't understand. It wasn't anger. It wasn't pity. It was something else. Something that made her stomach tighten. Then he spoke. "After 22 years, I finally found you." The room suddenly felt smaller. The air felt heavier. And what happened next would uncover a secret hidden for more than 2 decades. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. To understand why that morning changed everything, we have to go back many years earlier. The woman standing frozen in that kitchen was named Emily Carter. At 33 years old, Emily's life had become a daily battle against exhaustion. She was raising her 8-year-old son, Noah, completely on her own. Every morning she woke up before sunrise. Every night she returned home long after most people were asleep. She worked as a waitress during the day and cleaned office buildings several evenings each week. Her life followed the same pattern over and over. Wake up, work, rush home, help Noah with homework, pay bills, worry about money, sleep for a few hours, then do it all again. Most people who saw Emily would never have guessed how much pressure she carried. She smiled often. She spoke kindly. She always made sure Noah felt loved. But behind closed doors, there were nights when she sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at unpaid bills, while trying to figure out which one could wait another week. The rent was rising. Food prices were increasing. Her car needed repairs. And every month felt like a race she was losing. Still, she never complained. She simply kept moving forward. For Noah, everything was for Noah. The boy had inherited his mother's kindness and resilience. He rarely asked for expensive toys. He understood more about their financial situation than most children his age. Sometimes he would quietly put items back on store shelves when he noticed Emily checking prices. Those small moments broke her heart. Children should never have to worry about adult problems. But Noah did, and yet he continued smiling. That smile became Emily's reason for enduring every difficult day. She believed that if she worked hard enough, eventually things would improve. What she didn't know was that forces set in motion long before Noah was born were already moving toward her. The strange chain of events actually began 1 week before the morning she found the CEO in her kitchen. That day had started like any other. Emily finished her shift at a downtown restaurant and was walking toward a bus stop when she noticed a crowd gathering near a charity event being held outside a luxury hotel. Several expensive cars lined the street. Security personnel stood nearby. Photographers moved through the crowd. Most people would have kept walking. Emily almost did. Then she saw a man stumble. At first, nobody reacted. People assumed he was fine. But within seconds, it became clear something was wrong. The man grabbed a nearby railing. His face turned pale. Then he collapsed. Emily rushed forward before anyone else. She knelt beside him and immediately called for help. While others stood frozen, she remained calm. She spoke to him, checked if he was responsive, stayed with him until medical personnel arrived. The entire incident lasted only minutes. But before paramedics placed him into an ambulance, the man looked directly at her. Neither spoke very much. Yet there was something unusual in that brief exchange. Emily couldn't explain it. And after he was taken away, she returned to her normal life. She assumed she would never see him again. The man she had helped was Jonathan Reed. one of the wealthiest CEOs in the state. Within hours, news outlets reported that he had suffered a medical episode caused by severe exhaustion and stress. The story dominated local headlines for several days. Emily barely paid attention. She had her own problems to worry about. What she didn't realize was that Jonathan Reed had become interested in finding the woman who helped him, not because she saved his life. Something else had caught his attention, something that made him ask questions. Questions that would eventually lead him to her front door. A few days later, unusual things started happening. The first incident seemed harmless. Someone anonymously paid Noah's overdue school activity fees. Emily assumed there had been a mistake. The school assured her there hadn't been. The account showed a legitimate payment, no name, no explanation, just paid in full. She was confused but grateful. Then groceries appeared on her doorstep. Fresh food, milk, bread, vegetables, items she desperately needed. Again, there was no note, no indication of who had sent them. Emily began asking neighbors if they had seen anyone. Nobody had. A few days later, she received another surprise. Her mechanic called unexpectedly. The repairs she had been postponing for months had already been paid for. Someone had covered the entire bill. At this point, gratitude was replaced by concern. Who was doing this, and why? The mystery continued growing. Each answer led to more questions. Each question increased her uneasiness, because while unexpected generosity can feel like a blessing, unexplained generosity can also feel unsettling. Emily needed answers. She tried tracing payments. She contacted businesses. She asked everyone she could think of. Nothing. The person responsible remained invisible. Then came the morning that changed everything. A morning that began with a sound. A small sound, barely noticeable. The kind of sound most people would ignore. A chair moving across a floor. Emily opened her eyes. The house was dark. She checked the clock, 4:37 a.m. At first, she thought she imagined it. Then she heard another noise downstairs. Her body immediately became alert. Noah was asleep in his room. They lived alone. Nobody should have been inside the house. Carefully, she got out of bed. Every step felt heavier than the last. Her mind raced through possibilities. A burglar, an intruder, someone dangerous. She reached the hallway. The house remained quiet. Then she noticed a faint light coming from the kitchen. She slowly moved closer, and the moment she entered the doorway, her entire world stopped. Because sitting calmly at her kitchen table was Jonathan Reed, the billionaire CEO she had helped only days earlier. And he looked as though he had been waiting for her. And he looked as though he had been waiting for her. For several long seconds, neither of them spoke. Emily's first instinct was to wake Noah and call the police. Yet something in Jonathan Reed's expression stopped her. He didn't appear threatening. If anything, he looked nervous. The billionaire CEO who could command boardrooms full of executives seemed strangely uncomfortable, sitting at a worn kitchen table in a small, rented house. "How did you get in here?" Emily finally asked. Jonathan stood slowly and held up a key. "The landlord let me in after I explained why I was here. I know that sounds unbelievable, and I realize I owe you an apology." Emily stared at him in disbelief. "You owe me a lot more than an apology." "I know," he replied. "But if you hear me out, you'll understand why I came." Jonathan reached into a leather folder and carefully removed an old photograph. The moment Emily saw it, her breath caught. It was her mother. The picture looked decades old. Her mother appeared much younger, standing beside a man Emily had never seen before. Jonathan noticed her reaction. "You recognize her?" "Of course I do." "That's my mother." Jonathan nodded. "The man beside her was my father." Emily's heart began racing again. She looked from the photograph to Jonathan and back again. Nothing about this made sense. Jonathan sat down and began telling a story that started more than 20 years earlier. When he was a boy, his family owned a small transportation company. It was nowhere near the corporate empire it would eventually become. During a severe flood that struck a rural community, his father became trapped after attempting to help stranded residents. According to local reports from that time, several people tried to reach him, but were forced back by dangerous conditions. One person didn't turn back, a young woman named Rachel Carter, Emily's mother. Risking her own safety, Rachel helped guide Jonathan's injured father to higher ground and remained with him until rescue crews arrived. Doctors later said he might not have survived if she hadn't acted when she did. Jonathan's father never forgot her. After recovering, he spent months trying to find her. He eventually did. The two families met several times, and Jonathan's father promised that if Rachel or her future family ever needed help, he would be there. But life had other plans. A few years later, Jonathan's father died unexpectedly. Business records were lost during a complicated legal battle. The connection between the families disappeared, and Rachel Carter quietly moved on with her life. For decades, the promise remained forgotten. At least everyone thought it had. Jonathan slid another document across the table. It was a handwritten letter. His father's handwriting filled the page. At the bottom was a sentence that immediately brought tears to Emily's eyes. To Rachel Carter and her family, I will never forget what you did for me. Emily couldn't speak. Her mother had passed away years earlier. She had rarely discussed her younger days. Emily knew almost nothing about this chapter of her life. Why are you telling me this now? She asked. Jonathan took a deep breath. Because when you helped me outside that charity event, you reminded me of someone. The way you reacted. The way you put a stranger's safety before your own concerns. It reminded me of the stories my father told about Rachel. After returning home from the hospital, Jonathan began reviewing old family records. One discovery led to another. Eventually, he found the photograph, then the letter, then Rachel's name. His investigators traced public records until they found Emily. The more he learned about her situation, the more determined he became to finish what his father had started. The groceries, the school fees, the car repairs, Emily said quietly. Jonathan nodded. That was me. Emily looked down at the table. Part of her felt grateful. Part of her felt overwhelmed. And part of her struggled to believe any of this was real. Then Jonathan said something she would never forget. This isn't charity. It's gratitude. The room fell silent again. For years, Emily had faced every challenge alone. She had become accustomed to disappointment, to broken promises, to people leaving. Yet here sat a man honoring a promise made before she was even born. Jonathan explained that he wanted to establish an education fund for Noah and offer Emily a position within one of his community outreach programs. He believed her resilience, compassion, and determination could inspire others facing similar struggles. Emily expected there to be conditions. There weren't. She expected contracts. There were none. Jonathan simply wanted to do what his father would have done. Nothing more. Nothing less. Several months later, Emily's life looked very different. She no longer worked two exhausting jobs. Noah was thriving in school. The constant fear of overdue bills had finally disappeared, but the greatest change wasn't financial. For the first time, Emily understood the woman her mother had been. Rachel Carter had never considered herself a hero. She never sought recognition. She never told her story. She simply saw someone in danger and chose to help. That single decision echoed across decades. It touched lives she would never fully see. And eventually, it found its way back to her daughter. Some people leave behind money. Others leave behind possessions. Rachel left behind something far more valuable. A legacy of courage, a legacy of kindness, and a promise that refused to be forgotten. The morning Emily walked into her kitchen, expecting another ordinary day, she thought she was looking at a stranger sitting at her table. What she was really looking at was a connection to her mother's past. A past that had quietly been waiting more than 20 years to find her. And sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can travel farther than anyone could ever imagine. Because while Rachel Carter never lived to see the impact of what she had done, her compassion changed a family's future. Then years later, that family's gratitude changed hers. And that is why some stories never truly end. They simply wait for the right moment to be told. Thanks for watching. Please let us know in the comments section what you think about the story and the country you are watching from. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss our next video.